Hey there everybody, I'm going to get you started today on working with Michigan as the main focus. So our goal is to focus on Michigan as a cartographer. So a cartographer is somebody who makes maps, draws maps, produces maps. So we're going to make a map ourselves of the great state of Michigan, and then I'm also going to show you how to use a new technique in order to make a landscape that represents Michigan as well. So first you're going to need a piece of paper and a pencil, and then I also am going to have a ruler. So the ruler is used to make a box at the top and the bottom of our map, because we're going to kind of have a title and a saying, the top and bottom. So I'm going to measure, because my paper is kind of small right here, I'm going to measure maybe 1 or 1.5 inches. But if it's a larger paper, like my example I'm going to show you at the end, I did a 2-inch box. So based on the size of paper, I'll let you decide what size box for the top and bottom as well. But again, to make a box even on both sides, you're going to line up your ruler with the edge of your paper vertically, the up and down way, and I'm gonna go with 1.5. So at the 1-inch mark and then the 1/2 inch mark, halfway between 1 and 2, I'm gonna make a little tick mark, just like that. So just a little tick mark there, 1.5 inches down. And if you do it on the left, you got to do it on the right as well. So I'm going to hop over 1.5 inches over here. And then now that I have a tick mark on both sides, I can connect those dots or tick marks with my ruler, and it'll be perfectly straight, 1.5 inches on both sides. So I line up that ruler. One hand holds the ruler, one hand drags the pencil lightly across. Now I have a perfectly straight line and a rectangular box at the top. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the bottom. So again, 1.5, I measure and make a tick mark. 1.5, I measure and make a tick mark. Both sides. Can't pick favorites, otherwise it won't be even or equal. So, boom. Now I have a box on the top and the bottom. In the big space in the middle, we're going to sketch the map of Michigan. So, there's no such thing as perfect here, because we're not going to be able to make a perfectly accurate map to scale like this professional map here, but I am going to look at it as a reference. So a reference would be, you look at, I have a couple different kinds of maps here. So you look at the shape of Michigan, and I'm going to simplify a little bit with the lower peninsula and the upper peninsula. And I'm going to try to fit that in my space here. So I'm going to go kind of quick. On my regular example that I'll show you at the end, I went nice, slow, and steady to try to observe. So kind of like if you're drawing a still life, something that you're observing, you've got to look up every few seconds. So every 3 to 4 seconds you're looking up at what you're drawing. Same thing as if you're using a reference image. So I'm going to look every 3 to 4 seconds at the map here of Michigan, and again I'm going to go kind of quick and simplified just for the sake of the video and time. And again, keep it light till you get it right. So I didn't get all of Michigan in there. It would kind of come down a little ways. You could go into your box a little bit. And then the upper peninsula, I want to make sure I had space for that. So kind of a general form. I'm up into the box again. That's okay. So, pretty basic shape of the upper and lower peninsula. Again, it's not perfect. I didn't go super slow and steady. I would do that if it was my regular final copy. So, once you have your pencil the way that you like it, you can outline in Sharpie so that it stands out. So this is like the border lines of good old Michigan, the Michigan Mitten. we're really connecting to social studies here because we've learned about Michigan history and geography, and really, social studies and art connect more than I think any other subject. We've also just used a little math with our measuring and using the ruler as a tool. And I'll even get those boxes in there. Boom. Alright, so I have it outlined with Sharpie. Now I'm going to add details based on cities and places I've been and some memories that I have. I want you to add cities or symbols based on things that you're interested in, things that you have done, or places you've been, or places you want to go. There are some requirements, though, in the slideshow that I wanted you to watch first before this demo. So in those requirements, there's things like the Great Lakes. There's things like where we live, St. John's, the capital, Lansing, major cities, major symbols. So, for instance, I also have this little handout that's also in the slideshow, but it's symbols of our state. So, once you get some cities in there, so here's St. John's, I'll just put an SJ. Here's a star for Lansing, our capital. Detroit's over here. Ann Arbor's in there. Traverse City's up here. So a symbol for Traverse City could be the Traverse City cherries. You could have Mackinac Island. A place that I want to go is Drummond Island. That's over here. So you could label those. You could label the Great Lakes. You could draw the Mackinac Bridge, perhaps. So, again, things that interest you. Maybe you've been to the Mackinac Bridge. Maybe you've been sailing on Lake Michigan and you could get a sailboat in Lake Michigan. Maybe you've been to the Sleeping Bear Dunes. Maybe you could add a bear. Maybe you've been to the dunes. Maybe you've gone up north to see different trees. And actually, the state tree in Michigan is the white pine. Maybe you found Petoskey stones. Maybe you like to fish and you want the brook trout. Maybe you like turtles and you'd have the painted turtle, our state reptile. Maybe you're a hunter and you want the white-tailed deer. Or maybe you've seen apple blossoms and robins, which are symbols of our state too. So maybe I'll just get a robin flying over here. A giant robin in the middle of the state. Really, if you have some symbols, it's up to you how you want to do that. And maybe an apple blossom over here by Grand Rapids. And who knows what else. Maybe you're a U of M fan, you want the big block M by Ann Arbor. Maybe you're a state fan and you want Sparty by East Lansing here. So, up to you. Also, if you're a sports fan in Detroit, I'll show you on mine later that you could do that too. You could label the lakes, you could write the word Michigan or map of Michigan up here, and you could do it in any way that you want. You could write it in cursive, you could write it in block letters, you could write the Great Lakes State in block letters, or bubble letters, or anything that you want to do. It's your map. So on your map, include symbols, include cities that you've been or want to go to, and then you can add color as well with watercolor, crayon, colored pencil, you name it, whatever you want to do. Alright, now once you're done being a cartographer, working with your map, I'm going to show you a new technique with chalk pastels and liquid starch. So, I want you to look at some of the images on the slideshow, or you could look up images of Michigan lighthouses or Michigan sailboats. You'll see impressive colors, impressive sunsets, sunrises, different shapes of lighthouses. Pretty amazing stuff. Those are all photographs from Michigan. So you can look up those sites and major areas. You could also look up images of the Mackinac Bridge or sailboats. Anything from Michigan, a landscape. So we've done our map with symbols. Now we're going to focus on a landscape. And I'm going to go a little smaller here than my final copy. I'll show you in a little bit the final copies. But with your pencil, you're going to lightly sketch out a scene. So again, look at an image just like I looked at the map of Michigan. I'm observing. So I might look here. There's like a little structure next to the lighthouse. There's a door and a window, and then the lighthouse comes up. So this would be the foreground because it's in the front. So again, I'm going really fast. You take your time and really look. And there's some windows on the lighthouse too. And then maybe I'll get a sailboat out in the water. So that's like the middle ground, and then the background, there's one far away, so it is smaller. Maybe there's part of the dunes and the beach there, the horizon line of the water. And maybe I want it to be the sunset, so maybe I'll have the sun right there. So I haven't done every single detail, but I've just sketched it in with a little pencil. Now we're going to use chalk pastels to fill in the areas, but we're not going to blend it with our finger or with a blending tool like we have in the past. We're going to use what's called liquid starch, and I'm going to show you that in a second. It's going to turn a chalk drawing into almost the effect of an oil painting. So it's going to be pretty cool. So first I'm going to just layer some chalk. I'm not filling the whole area because we're going to blend it with that liquid starch. So I won't do the whole thing here, but there's some water, and then of course we know that things are darker and more detailed and bolder in the foreground. So maybe I'll add some darker blue into my foreground, or what's closer. Maybe I'll add some lighter blue or even a little white to the water near that horizon line where it gets lighter. Let's see, for the sunset, I'll get a little yellow in that sun, but then I might just have some streaks of yellow across the sky. Maybe add some pink in there, a little orange, maybe even a little red in that sunset. And then as it gets closer to that the top of the sky, the foreground sky is right at the very tip top, it'll start turning purplish bluish just like a normal sky would, and get a little darker because it is starting to become nighttime. Boom. Maybe I have a red sailboat, and maybe it's got some green sails, red and green contrast right there. And then some of that sunset is actually going to put light into the water, believe it or not. So you'll see some of the reflection of the light in the water where that sunset is. If you're looking at an image, you'll kind of see that in the photograph. Maybe the lighthouse itself is a little sandy tan, and maybe I'll crisscross with a little gray for the brick. So I'll kind of use the edge of the chalk for some brick there. Alright, so I didn't fill the whole thing in. I'm going to show you my final copy in a little bit, but I want to show you what happens when you use liquid starch to blend your chalk. So I have a little cup of liquid starch here. It's not water, it's liquid starch. So I use this brand, Purex liquid starch. So if you don't have liquid starch, you could just do a chalk drawing normal and blend it with your finger, and it looks amazing as well. But I wanted to show you this new technique because I think it's pretty cool. You're going to just dip your finger in the liquid starch and use that as a blendy blend tool. So liquid starch finger, and as I go over, it's starting to blend that chalk and it's turning the chalk almost into like an oily paint. And now I'm going to go down to the darker area, and I just keep dipping my finger in the liquid starch. I'll also get that little highlight in the water there, and it's starting to look like real water. I'll get the sails in the sailboat. I'll get the sailboat itself and have that reflect in the water by blending it in. I'll go over here to the lighthouse. I'll get those bricks in there, and it creates that shadow because this part of the lighthouse is facing away from the sun, so that gray blended in really nicely with the sandy tan to get a darker shadow. Now I'll get that sunset in there. So maybe I'll use my pinky finger as like a smaller detail for the sun. And those warm colors of the sunset are now starting to blend and make a pretty cool effect as it blends together and mixes to make what I think looks like an oil painting. So very fancy. So I'm blending. So the liquid starch mixed with the chalk pastel blends it together, makes it look like a painting, and then once it's dry, believe it or not, there will be zero chalk dust, because once this dries, that liquid starch fixes the chalk to the paper, and it will not make a mess or blend or make a dust storm ever again. Pretty incredible stuff. So liquid starch mixed with chalk on paper gives it that oil painting effect and also fixes it so you don't make a mess once it's dry. So now I'm going to show you my final copies of one of those drawings turned paintings. So just like in the slideshow, I have this image in the slideshow if you want to go back and look at it. But again, I started by just making marks with the chalk and not blending it yet. And then once I was finished with the chalk, I dipped my finger in the liquid starch and blended. And then it was dry, and it doesn't make a mess at all. It's fixed to the paper, and it looks like an oil painting, like maybe somebody sat at the lighthouse on Lake Michigan and painted this scene right there while the sun was setting. So very cool effect. I dig it. And it also connects to Michigan history. And then here is my map that I did. So again, I used the ruler first, created the box at the top. This is a 2-inch box at the top, 2-inch box at the bottom. I wrote the Great Lakes State and Michigan at the top. I also added some bark texture, so it looks like tree bark on the bottom left and top right corners. And then I really observed and got a much better outline of the map of Michigan. I still did simplify it a little bit because you can't be absolutely 100% accurate. And then I used wax resist, so I used a little crayon. I also used colored pencil and crayon for the details. And then over top, I used watercolor paint. So I have my compass rose with my directions, north, south, east, west. I have symbols that represent my experience in Michigan, but also places I want to go to or visit again. And also symbols of the state. So symbols of different cities like sports teams, but also symbols like our state fish, reptile, flower, stone, tree, bird, mammal for hunting, you name it. So it's an homage or honor to Michigan, the Great Lakes state that we live in, and also connects us to social studies and cartographers. We can be map makers, and we can also be a little bit like scientists and mix different materials together to create new effects. So we're learning new things, we're using that learning to honor Michigan as well. So you guys, I cannot wait to see what you come up with in terms of your map making skills as well as your landscape making skills. So be good cartographers, be good observers, be champion artists as always, and I look forward to seeing what you create. Adios, amigos.